Okay, it's top of the hour. Why don't we get started? This is the weekly meeting for our dev metrics working group. And for every meeting, we will be running through the persistent links, going through the hypotheses, and then going through the agenda afterwards. So with that, I'll kick us off with going through the dashboard. And a second, let me share my screen. Can everybody see my screen? Great, so I'm on a different link. My apologies. Well, so first link is the average MRs per month. We are by almost mid of June now, and roughly halfway at 4.45, excluding community contributions. With including community contributions, we're at 4, but it looks like we are making progress to be at par compared to the previous month. Any thoughts, comments from stakeholders?
Yeah, so I didn't look at these too far ahead of time. Obviously, last month was down because of contribute. Typically, we've seen us cresting between 5 and 6 at the midway point. So it feels like we're a little bit behind, but not excessively so. Considering we've still got essentially 2 more days this week, and then we've got 2 business weeks to go. It'll be interesting to see, like, if what I seem to remember is both quarters of March and April, we saw us roughly at just below 9, and both of those, we about the midpoint of the month, we were about 5. So it feels like we're getting close to it, but we're not quite there. But we still got a couple more days in the month to kind of see how that fits out.
Okay, thank you, Christopher.
Sure thing.
Craig, Lyle, Mark, I know the import is still ongoing. Any comments from all of you?
So the import's still occurring right now? Or is it?
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, it's still going right now as this meeting's going on.
Okay, so it's going to get better.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that towards the end of the agenda. Mark, if you can add one item there, please, because we have seen performance being slow. It could be because we're dog fooding our APIs, which is a good thing. It's surfacing this. A mitigation is to start the import earlier, so at least it's in time for this meeting every day, and it's like at 9:30 PST. Okay, with that, I'm moving on to the next persistent link, which is total monthly merged MRs. And while we're waiting for that, why don't I open this up as well?
Well, I'm glad that to hear that we're still working on importing, because that kind of helps at least me feel a little more comfortable that maybe there's a little bit of additional MRs coming in, though I think the bulk of them have kind of come in. If you look at the bottom graph, which includes community contributions, we're sitting at 807 today. The first week of June was our largest month ever. We were 16 MRs above what we achieved in the first week of April. So that's a pretty significant milestone from that perspective. Though we've obviously hired a number of folks in the past couple of months. So the question would be is you would expect maybe to see a slightly bigger rise, but of course getting people productive usually is a 3 to 6 month, not a 1 to 2 month thing associated with that. So consequently, I feel pretty good about where we are. 810 feels, now it's at 810. Mine says 807. Feels a little light relative to the halfway point, but the first week being the highest week ever bolsters some confidence there. Like, I would expect us to potentially hit over 1779, which is 2 months ago, based on at least that initial projection.
Okay. Christopher, do you want us to keep an eye on this going into early next week? Because that's like the midpoint.
Yeah, I think that's where, we just look at it Monday morning and kind of see based on the midpoint what we're looking at, and then kind of go from there.
Okay, sounds good. Anybody else wants to chime in on this metric? Okay. With that, I'm moving on to the third one. So credit to Mark, this is now automated, really crude. This essentially lists the time to close bugs. The first graph, it's all bugs. And then we start filtering by S1. It's a really boring, bare bones implementation. We were going to migrate this to Insights, but this was the fastest path to get metrics for all the stakeholders and execs here. So if you scroll down, we filter it by S1, S2, and then we have S1 with customer and S2 with customer. There are some concerns from me. I haven't had time to dig into this yet, but with this graph, I think there are more issues with S1 and customer. Potentially, we are not adding customer labels when an issue is affecting a customer. The notch automation we're working with, like detecting send desk links and all that, could potentially help this. We could just add a customer label when the send desk link is present. Not sure, Lai, you want to chime into any of that?
Honestly, I don't know. I don't have anything meaningful to add. I shouldn't have even unmuted.
Okay, thank you. So this is the key point here. It is automated. Why don't we go up and take a look at customer bugs in general, S1, S2. So average is 7 days for this month. Well, it's still ongoing. It's still being stable. I'm monitoring the 95 percentile and 85 percentile. It seems to be very unstable. Though I want to underscore that June is still in progress, so the average may be coming down towards the end of the month. But it was relatively, I would say, stable or stabilizing. Moving down to S2s, we have the bulk of the issues in S2s, and looking at the last month going backwards, it seems stabilizing. And when I said going down, I was looking at S2s. The 95 days are like 248 days. So yeah, I would revisit this again when we have the complete month of June. And there are existing SLO mechanisms that we are going to nudge people on, and that's going to help with this as well. I do want to say that this metric won't get better until we burn down the backlog of issues that are a year and a half or more than a year old, because those will affect the time to close. Christopher, Craig, everybody on this team, comments?
Sorry, actually, I thought of something to comment. I'm curious how many issues have Zendesk links that don't have the customer label. I would actually surprise me. I think that the team is pretty good about adding the customer label, but we only kind of interact with issues that come into Zendesk. So it could be that we have customers that are affected by issues that they go directly to the trackers and interact with the issues directly and don't necessarily even alert that they are customers or let support know. And so I don't know if there's a good way to handle situations like that, or even know how pervasive that is.
Is it something that we could automate? I mean, I know some customers don't want to tell they are a customer and use their own personal account sometimes. I think we're stepping into the unknowns, and if we're grading ourselves, we should be doing it at least in the area that we are confident about, rather than like trying to do everything at once.
No, I'm not making any hard suggestion, just noting that there's some unknown areas that I'm just not sure. Like a potential automation would be we could pull people that are in the customer projects, and add tags on things that they interact with, but even that would be wouldn't be perfect. So
I see. So you're saying that if we can detect if a user added a comment or participated in one of the customer projects, then we could potentially infer from those users, and whatever issues that they file should get a customer label.
Potentially, yeah.
Got it. Okay. That sounds like beyond the 20, 40, 80. Those are like the edge cases that we need more effort to deal with. So I think we should put that on the backlog for now and focus on getting at least this population numbers down.
I had a question. Lyle, when I was on the support team, I did notice that some customers would not install the latest version of GitLab, and they would hold off maybe a version or two behind. And it could be possible that some of the users using CE report the issue, but a customer doesn't come across it because they are a couple of versions behind, and it wouldn't get that customer label because it wasn't experienced by that customer. But I was wondering if that could affect the amount of S1s and S2s that do actually have the customer label as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good thought. Many of our larger customers do lag a little bit and don't run the most current version. And so it could be that, yeah, I think that very much could be the case.
Okay. Christopher, any thoughts?
Yeah, a couple. So is it easy to break this out by group or by a section?
I think we only recently added section labels, but we potentially could slice them by
team.
By teams, yeah.
Team's fine. Like, I don't necessarily need it exactly by section, but that's kind of the first thing. The other thing that probably be interesting is once we feel like this data is somewhat stable, what we should do is we should probably bring it to the PM and engineering meeting,
right?
Basically to start talking about, because it feels like my first suspicion is that we're not prioritizing the bugs. And that's the question is like, if we're concerned about this metric and it's important to us, then that means that we have to prioritize the work. If it's not being prioritized now, if it is prioritized and we're still seeing this, then that's a different discussion. But that's kind of where I wanted to potentially get the breakout based on group to kind of better understand it.
Point noted.
I have a question on the graphs. So it reads time to close. Is it that simple? How the time is from when the label was applied or when the bug was open until the issue was actually closed?
Yes, when it was opened until it was closed.
Okay. Do we ever measure, and I don't know how we would do it, I'm still learning the whole process, but time to respond? I know we have an SLA, but sometimes we may not meet it, right? It seems like an important thing to measure.
So we did talk about this. There are two ways on going about it. Time to respond. Responding to me is somebody, hopefully on the product side, adds a priority label, and that's when it gets triaged. We have a bunch of triage processes and triage levels in place. I can send you the links later. But right now, everybody in quality engineering triages new issues. So we at least can guarantee that it will get to a team with a severity label within a week when it was open, because we look at it every day, we fan it out. Like it's 5 issues per engineer actually right now, and it would get better if we start filling in the heads on our side. I think we need to measure when it gets scheduled, and then when a priority has been assigned. And we don't have an API to pull the milestone activity right now. The best mechanism is when that prioritization label has been applied by a product manager.
I was noticing in the API documentation that we have notifications. I think it was notifications or discussions as an option to get information on. You have to cross-reference it with the MR that you're looking at. But I was wondering if that data was just not available on .com, but isn't available in the hosting product or not. I haven't had a chance to play with it, Craig. There may be a way that may have found a way for us to potentially get that time to first comment, because we need that for community contributions anyways. So
yeah, for sure. Who applies the label? Is that us?
Yes. I mean,
Okay.
Across the functions, engineering, product.
Okay. Do they ever get downgraded? Like often an S1 can come in, I've seen in other companies where you have no workaround and somehow, excuse me, during the course of time, you do figure out an acceptable workaround while you continue to work on the larger bug. Do we ever downgrade severities?
I'm pretty sure we have, though there is no written guidelines on what is an acceptable path to downgrade. I think we should bring this up to the product team. Jason is supposed to be here, so he could chime in. But I've seen cases where it gets moved around, and sometimes it gets bumped up as well from an S3 to an S2.
Right, for sure. I'm wondering if it's probably an edge case that severities get changed, but I'm wondering if that would affect the graph at all either. You know, if you have an S1 that is truly a blocker, but we find a workaround after a couple of days and you can bring it off this graph, or if it always stays in S1 and
it gets refreshed. The dashboards get synced with the data every day, and once we move this to the native feature, it's just going to be real time from the database.
Okay.
Jason's here, Mick. He probably joined, and you don't see him because you're sharing.
Oh.
You can only see 5 people, but he's lurking out there. You can see him.
Oh, sorry, Jason. I missed you. I apologize. Yeah, would you like to chime in?
I'm actually not 100% sure on
Okay. Shall we move on to the hypotheses? Before we move on, we added trend lines in the previous version of this graph in Google Sheets because that's really easy. If we don't really care about trend lines in this iteration, I'm going to move that out of the scope because I want to move this into the GitLab native feature. That is going to be GA this month. So we're lifting the feature flag along with the blog post, and we're going to move our effort there instead. If everybody's okay, I will close out this as done for this iteration. Thank you. And I will stop sharing my screen. Oh, wait. Let's go through the hypotheses. Skipping through to the ones in black. Number 8, I'm not sure if we made any progress here. Developers with less tenure at GitLab come with a different background. And then those who are here longer are more productive. I know Clemente has transitioned off this working group. Dalia, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is I believe we talked about putting a hold on working on these hypotheses in favor of the things that we're focusing on, which is building dashboards and Periscope, some of the work that your team is doing. Do you feel that there's value in continuing to pursue some of these? I'm not saying we should delete them, but in the interest of time, I don't know. Like, I have not been focused on them, so I want to make sure that that's the correct expectation.
I'll let Christopher chime in. I don't have any strong opinions. We could just don't touch it for the rest of the working group as well if we're okay putting in the state.
Yeah, well, the only thing I was going to say was, Craig, if you wanted to jump on that issue and take a look at it, and you thought it was something interesting you want to investigate, then that's an opportunity for us to potentially get you started from that perspective, kind of understand the ins and outs of it. And if you want to hit me up next week or even tomorrow for a little bit of, a 101, more than happy to do that. So I'm okay with the general direction. The one thing I'll say is that since we have Craig joining us, this may be an area where he can kind of look at it.
Okay. And that is number 8 and 9, both of them? Or is there anyone that's specific?
I was thinking specifically in terms of 8, 9, Dahlia. I'm guessing you would like to do the same for 9.
Yeah, I would say, Craig, if you're interested in either one, I haven't really done much on there. Like I said, right now, I feel like the focus should be on building the basic dashboards in Periscope if we can.
Okay. I'll add a few
I mean, I have some real-time information with the new team members and some of the feedback they're giving on their ability to get up to speed quickly. So I'm certainly interested in taking a look at this stuff. And I'll find some time with Christopher tomorrow to sync up.
Thanks, Craig. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
1 second. Let me just put the last decisions in. Okay. moving on to the agenda. I have the first one. So I'm suggesting a format to score the exit criteria every time. I do have an MR out. I suggested this in the scalability working group as well, where if we have an issue or an epic, if it's a long running thing, just link it in line in the working group, and then let's just score it in the description. So like it can be real time every week, so we don't have to make a MR to the handbook every time you score something. And leads and engineers should just be, if they are assigned, just update this in real time. Any suggestions, comments?
I like the idea of kind of follows the rest of our setup.
Yep, it's going to be very similar to how we do OKR scoring. Okay, and so the MR is there. If anybody wants to add any additional scoring, please feel free to look at it, and then I'll pick it up later towards the end of the week. Okay. Next one, just reiterating the third dashboard that we've shown. Thank you, Mark, again, for a quick whip up of the dashboard. Now we see the metrics coming in. The next one is the interesting one, because now we have data on issues that missed SLOs. And I also updated the label to be SLOs instead. Thank you, Christopher. Lyle and Jason from last time. I also made an update to the documentation page and removed any references to SLA, stating the same reason as well. So it is now an SLO. Thank you to Mark, one-time Triads run. We now have a list of how many P1 to P3s in CE and EE have exceeded that SLO time. And I removed P4 for now, because that can go on to infinity, because in our SLO it says 120 days and beyond. And I think we should just focus our energy on P1 and P1 to P3s for now, and try to get improvements in those areas. I'll open it up for the team to comment. My question would be, who would be the best to help us groom these? Once we generate like a report, we can have a long tail of items, potentially hundreds. We don't do this in phases where we detect them, but we should look at P1 to P2 first, because that seems more manageable. And then P3 would just come after we have P1 and P2s under control.
Can we break it down by stage and then assign them out to the product managers for each stage? Then it's probably more manageable. You can do it all at once. That would be my recommendation.
I was wondering, because we can break it down by stage, but I was wondering, I know that the group triage packages or stage triage packages have a lot of information in right now, but I was wondering whether that's the best place to surface these, because we could limit it to P1 and P2 and just maybe have 5 a week, because we can limit it that way as well. But it would be an extra section in there.
I'd rather get an extra section than an extra issue.
And I don't think we should limit it. I
wouldn't limit it either.
Yeah, I think the first dump, just let it show how much is in the backlog that needs to be handled.
I agree.
And let's see if we can make progress.
And as far as the criteria for SLO and detection goes, are we all good? 30 days, 60, 90, that's what's in described in the SLO target page.
I think the one that I'm not, so P1 and P2 I think are very reasonable and obviously highlight the importance of addressing these. Do we consider P3 to be still in line with, I mean, this is where it gets, in that area of we can live with it. How long can we live with it? Are they really important? And if we live with it for 3 months, does it need to be prioritized? So maybe Jason, that's where you weigh in from a product side. Do you feel like 90 days is something you want to handle all P3s, or at that point they should be closed out if we have no plans to address them?
Yeah, really good question. I think that probably 90 days is sooner than I would just close it and say, I'm never going to get around to this. But I wouldn't want it to be much longer than that either, because some of them can be relatively important. Maybe 90 days is okay to start, and then we just kind of go from there. 300, we have 12 stages, so it's sort of manageable, I think. And there's like, roughly 25 issues or 30 issues per stage if it's evenly distributed. So I think that that's reasonable, and if people find that it's too much, then we can adjust.
Do we currently, from a product perspective, do we advertise how many bugs we're fixing a release or anything of that nature? Should we think about doing that?
We do it in throughput. So on a weekly basis, you can take a look at how many MRs went up against bugs. It may or may not be a direct mapping one-to-one, but you can definitely see week to week where the team is investing time.
Yeah, we do it from a evaluation of what our team's invested in. I'm wondering whether or not we should, as a product, be communicating that to our customers in a more direct fashion.
Could be an interesting kind of byline thing on the blog post. I would maybe ask Rebecca about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's something we could take to the PM-Ing discussion, Jason, if you think it's worthwhile. First of all, I want your buy-in before I would take it to that discussion.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea that I would just veto.
Yeah, well, the reason I say it is because, as an example, and not that we want to emulate ourselves after them, but Red Hat's a great example where their whole business was built around validation and bug fixing. And, it is product expansion is definitely an element, but also people will say, oh, well, you're fixing all the bugs. So it's all the more reason why we should, get a potential subscription with you at GitLab. So that's just the thought process.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So it's not insane is what I'm hearing.
It's not insane.
This is the first
it
place.
It could potentially be a vanity metric because you can create lots of little bugs and fix them all, but.
Well, that's true about features too. So. But that's a different discussion.
It's more about the story we tell in the blog post, but
yeah, you could argue it's transparency too, right? This is
sure.
We realize we're recognizing that we're writing bugs, but also fixing them. Okay.
In that case, we don't want to include how many are being created, probably.
Yeah, as far as form and function, I'm not necessarily as much as it's the idea of if we want to really prioritize this, then it seems like that's one way is one is getting product managers, but then the other part of it is hey, we're kind of expecting that you keep up, or your team's keeping up. And if it's not, then you need to be raising that to figure out what the right thing to do is from an organizational perspective.
Great. Why don't we move on? The next one is important as well, per hygiene and throughputs. Christopher, you want to take it?
Yeah, so I think I took an action from last time to kind of start pushing on hygiene. So basically I opened a issue where I asked all the groups labeled to basically go through and clean up. And most of them have responded, so that's really positive in regards to the fact that we've had pretty quick cleanup. What's unfortunate is that there is at least one case, which is we're still seeing about 300, at least as of yesterday, 300 undocumented labeling cases. And so I started going through to kind of look at teams and try to figure out if it's just because, teams I gave basically folks a week and kind of figure out that end of it. And I did notice that, for instance, there were 120 for documentation. I talked to Mike Lewis. He's on board. He's going to basically get that addressed. But then the other part of it is there's a bunch that are undefined. And then on top of it, they don't have a team assignment. So because of that, it's really hard to figure out, based on that, the labeling. The one that jumped out to me when I first did an analysis, though it's maybe 30 of them, is delivery team has a bunch, and I wasn't sure how to best go about that. So that was kind of the question was, should we add delivery? And then the other bit of feedback I got on that issue, if you look at it, is backstage for a lot of people are living backstage when they're doing documentation. So I wondered if we should have a separate category for documentation.
So I think documentation is mainly cost of a feature. And the recommendation I would make is that they all get automatically the feature label. And if docs feel like this was a bug or something that should be recategorized, we can do it. But I feel like that's going to be more of a rare case. So if we feel like that's an okay and an acceptable form, that should be easy to automate. Just automatically apply feature label on every doc MR.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that would be the vast majority of the cases are going to be about documenting a feature in one way or the other.
Right.
Okay, so for cases where it is documentation, it should not be considered backstage. It should be considered a feature, and we should go label accordingly. Okay, all right.
Yeah, the interesting one is that the 160 that were not labeled by a team. I mean, there are cases where someone might be working on someone else's stage, but that's also somewhat rare. I would say that do we feel like every individual developer should know what label they personally are associated with? Like, I am on the static analysis team, so I will use this label, and it shouldn't be wondering what label do I put here.
Well, it seems like we're based on the way we're doing this that we have to assume that, right? Like, I don't know how you can avoid that short of adding it to the workflow.
Well, I think there's more thought process that goes into it. Like, does this affect, verify stage? And even though I'm insecure, I am doing work that is related to verify. So should I label it verify or should I label it, secure? I just want to see, like, are we overthinking this, or can we make it an easy formula so that in most cases the label is easily applied and correct?
We will be confused on support.
Okay. Well, but I mean, like, the individual developers, like, I am creating this MR to fix this. I am on this team.
For label hygiene on docs MRs, though, I think we will need some help on support. Just helping us to make sure that we have things in the way that you want them.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, and I apologize. I'm not dismissing that this has been like, we've been iterating, and there is change in labels, change in process. So I recognize it. I just would like to walk away with a simple formula so that we can simplify it, but also make it more accurate than what we have right now.
I would apply the label. The rule of thumb I would use is if you're on a team that already has a label, then you should be applying that label regardless of where you're working in the code base. And then if you're not on a team that has a label, then put it on the one that you think it best applies to, and then go from there.
Yeah, I think from a product side, we do it the other way. If I'm on the verified, adding a feature to, maybe a good example is the other one. Like, if I'm on a secure team and I'm doing something related to templating that's in verify, I think that the correct label is the verify label, because it's about templating, and it will be published in the blog about templating. It gets the team label or group label, which is capital secure, but it should get the DevOps : verify label.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of what we talked about is like, for throughput, we want to measure the team's capacity and their execution regardless of where they're contributing. So you can derive these labels from the team membership. But the case that you and I are talking about, where a team is contributing to another stage, that's where, do you want that capacity to be toward the team they're contributing to or to their team? And it's like, what lens do you want to look at? Do you want to look at from product investment, this is where it falls? Or do you want to look at from an engineering execution, this is where the capacity is coming from? And we're not going to win on both. So we should decide what's more important and use that for this iteration. And if it gets to be misleading or we're not getting the value we need, we can adjust. I don't know.
I'm not sure I parsed which one was which in your statement, Dahlia, but
Okay.
I'll put it slightly differently, which is it has to be on the team that you're in, not where the work is, because we do allow teams to go wherever they need to get their job done, but otherwise we're going to be constantly looking back and forth and saying, oh, well, this team's doing really well. Well, if this team's doing really well because everybody's helping them, then that's not really representative of the situation, right? I think that has to be our primary driver to then ask the secondary question of, well, if it turns out that they're working in other areas, then that's definitely a discussion topic for that team to kind of discuss. But the first and foremost thing is to represent the work that they're doing.
And I think you can't really get out of using the capital S secure type labels instead of the DevOps : stage labels.
I think what you just said, Christopher, is a really important point, and we need to make sure that that gets communicated out, because I can see it being confusing, and like it's a really good why, but I can see that in the future, like that's going to have to be communicated again and again.
Yeah. This is the classic. You got to say it 3 times, and then maybe people hear it on the 3rd time. And by the way, then you have to repeat it every 3 months because there's new people on board.
Well, actually, I think like what I was trying to say is like it depends on what value you want to get out of the metric. So Christopher, you described it perfectly for engineering. We care about the team, how the individuals on the team are executing and their capacity. What I was trying to highlight is that from product point of view, that's not really the view that they care most about. They want to see from an investment in the product, what these contribution map to. So I think if we're okay to focus on engineering execution, let's just drive for that formula that's based on team membership.
But they own the investment of where the headcount are allocated. So ultimately it has to represent that, right? So like misrepresenting that by team disorganization isn't going to necessarily help that, right? If anything, what you want to do is you want to lock to the fact that, hey, like if Jason tomorrow said everybody's working on Create, everybody's going to go work on Create, assuming that he gets everybody to agree to that. Like, that's what's going to happen. So like we're going to go shift resources around based on where they think the capacity is. So
true. Let me clarify just one thing, because there is a use case that PM drives, like when they're doing the release post, they're looking at these labels to determine this is what we shipped and verify, this is what we shipped and secure. When we label based on execution, there's a situation where the secure team is contributing to something that the verify team will end up releasing. But the secure is so it will have the secure label. So if we go by that, the blog post is potentially going to put a verify feature under secure. So we can definitely address these things. I'm not saying like it's impossible. I'm just highlighting that's the difference in how we engineering are using these labels versus how product is using these labels. It's not for capacity. It's for the blog post and where the feature is coming from, like landing in the product itself.
Okay. May I jump in a bit here? I think
sure.
We're talking about label hygiene. So there's an issue for the rollout. We were planning to deprecate the old team labels, actually, because when we say team, it's a collection of people reporting to a manager in the org structure. Secure has both front end and back end. So for you to infer a team, you need DevOps secure and either front end or back end, then you can scope that to a team. That's the definition in this MR that I'm gonna put it in. 1 second.
What I'm saying though is that isn't right to use the DevOps label, because that could be a different. Knowing it has the DevOps secure label and the backend label doesn't mean that a person on the secure team implemented it.
How come? Because that should be implemented by the secure team.
No. So for the example that I gave, right? So the secure team has been doing a bunch of work related to includes in order to make, and the auto DevOps team is also very common, where they'll be working on includes or pipeline features. Those pipeline features are still features related to DevOps verify. So they get communicated to customers as being about CI and about pipelines. So they have the DevOps verify label and then front end or back end, but it correlates with a secure team member, not a verified team member.
Is that just an edge case in the newer areas that we're putting up for now? Like for dev, I think that's more stable.
It's fairly common. There's not a ton of issues. I mean, you could look it up by finding issues where the because we have those labels currently, like the capital S secure team label. Search for issues that have the capital S secure team name and the DevOps verify label, and you'll see how many times that happens. It's relatively frequently.
I see.
We encourage teams to, like Chris said, work anywhere in the code base they need to. But we still try to, from a product side and communicating with customer side, label those with the appropriate DevOps stage.
I see. I think we should take this to the broader product discussion, because we were going to document what this label means. There was an MR by Fabio a while back. I think it's closed now. I think we should resurrect that. I don't think we should have two nomenclatures of release and another release label. I think because we were planning to infer an author to which dev stage or team he's in, and we're going to ensure hygiene that way, and not and that also takes care of the migration of like people moving teams, because they can be in the secure stage, but then maybe the next release comes around, they need help, so they're like contributing to the DevOps create stage, for example. So we address migrating people, moving teams that way, and not like having migrations and like caching tables and all that stuff. So yeah, that's my take on it. Christopher, I know you put something on chat.
Yeah, I'm just voicing my frustration with the labels. I've had too many projects where we've tried to use labels to successfully measure this stuff, and it invariably leads to these types of problems. So I'm just voicing general frustration, which is not really constructive to the conversation. So is the upshot that we need to start working on an MR for the handbook around the labels, or at least go back to the documentation and see what we have listed, and then kind of figure out how best to update it?
Right. I can dig up the MR that was closed, and it was Fabio's attempt at cleaning up the label.
It got dumped on my lap, and then somehow or another it disappeared on me. So I'm not even sure what happened there.
Okay.
Whether somebody stole it from me or what happened. But yeah, there's that MR, but then there's also just the handbook, update to the page to basically say, here's how we expected to use the labels and the rough criteria that I kind of described. Which I think we're in rough agreement on that, including this one complexity of the PM release structure, leveraging it. Which I don't know, Jason, how many MRs are we talking about? Is it in the noise, or is it a?
It's hard. I don't know.
I mean, if we're talking about 50 MRs and we've got 2,000 running a month, then that's we just need to know. Okay, this is 1% off, which is not or 2% off, which is not. That's like in the noise relative to the problems we're trying to analyze.
Yeah, maybe it's 50 to 100, somewhere around there.
Okay, so it's right now it's probably about more like 5%, which is getting close to being concerning from that perspective. Okay.
Okay, I linked the context MR there. That was the one that was closed. I think one of us should probably look into it and see any effective iterations to the handbook and definitions should be made. So the link is there.
Yeah, and I'll take an action to start working on that.
Okay. But before we move on, I do want to outline a few points here. We are talking about filtering issues in MRs by absence of a label. We don't have that right now. That's why we're downloading CSV from Insights. This should really be a product feature, because you should be able to search by, hey, my team or dev stage MRs, and it doesn't have a throughput label. You can essentially do that here in the issue tracker itself, and not have this CSV ceremony and things. So I wanted to outline that. And then, yes, we should have non-dev stage group teams who work on adding delivery views into the dashboard. Any additions there before we move on to Christopher's next point?
Cool. My next one was on how the deliverables are calculated. Basically, last two releases, we've seen an uptick there. Jason kind of called that out, and I was trying to just make sure I understood based on that whether that information was accurate. So that was kind of the question there, is how we're counting that, and whether there were any challenges.
Okay, I'll verbalize the answer here. So before we were tagging it on the 7th, which is the feature freeze, we no longer have that anymore. So in the future, it's going to be tagged together with everything on the 23rd of each month going forward. The 7th is probably, it's no longer applicable with how we're doing things right now. And then that may have been causing the uptick in the last month, but it shouldn't be the case for the last month, because we would still had a feature freeze in effect, and they were really missed. That's the case.
Okay, so not necessarily this month, but the fact that we saw it in May is not too surprising.
Yes.
Okay.
On a related note, did the accumulation of Did we get analysis on the accumulation of?
Hasn't happened yet. I didn't get to it.
Okay. If you're not aware of the label transitioning, in the milestone grooming moving, I will link the issue again after this meeting. Okay. We have a one-off triage report for unscheduled customer bugs. And this is just a one-off thing for issues with customer and bug that doesn't have a milestone and it is unscheduled. Mark has been going in and tagging relevant product managers to take a look at it. Is there any better venue for this? Jason, any insights?
I would do the same thing. I would put it in the same weekly update.
Okay.
This is all good info for. I got pinged on a couple of these by Mark, and I was so thankful that he raised them to me.
Okay. So
yeah, it helped me catch things that I might miss amongst all the issues. So it's very much appreciated.
I think we'll probably have to rename the triage package into a triage report because we plan to include links to metrics and stuff. So okay, I'll take that as the directional items then. Cool. Mark, you want to take on the last one? Import time?
Yeah. So yeah, it was kind of halfway through by the time we started this meeting, so I'm just going to move it a few hours earlier. But we have been having problems with the import taking a little bit longer, and I need to investigate why that's happening. But I'll just move it a few hours earlier so we definitely have the right metrics at the start of this meeting.
This is probably even a little bit farther forward, but is there anything wrong with doing it at midnight UTC?
Yeah, I think that's fine. We were discussing changing the import time, and I think that was what was suggested. So yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, as long as we're consistent on it, that's great. That's the main thing. But yeah, it just feels like people, like I look at it first thing in the morning. So I think the only people that may be hampered by that is folks in Australia or late in the day. But I think they can manage.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
I just added one impromptu. We've had a few conversations around freezing the quality dashboards. Meg, do you have an update on that? Are we going to move forward with it? Okay, Christopher is very unhappy about it. I will miss it dearly.
What do you mean by freeze? You mean
if you remember, you and I had a conversation that the quality dashboard was not going to be updated and used for auditing.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I'm referring to.
So Rama added a comment. I haven't had the chance to reply yet. We're thinking of being flexible here, of guaranteeing that the number doesn't decrease. And I think he gave a rough number. Like if we're at 75 right now, and like the delta coming in is going to be 25, I think it's acceptable. I still need to read through that. But again, like I don't think we should be freezing metrics on our side because this is how we run the organization. Right. And a question back to you is, this is a good window to import any other projects that we're missing.
Yeah.
Do you have a priority list that we should jump on?
I put that question to the managers. I haven't heard anyone say that they need a project added. So I will ask again just to make sure that, yes, they have audited their projects and we're good from that regard. But my assumption from the silence is that their teams are covered. So short answer, I'll follow up, get a final answer, but I think we're good.
We have the memory team now in there, I think, right? Is that correct?
Which one? Sorry.
Just in the hierarchy, I was thinking about the teams. Memories, is memory listed?
Memory, I think, is there. 1 second. Yes, it's in the new dashboard and also the current team one as well.
Okay, all right. So we've got that one, and then the other one that I've heard is some discussion around telemetry. potentially, but that's not a decided aspect. So we may have a separate telemetry team.
Okay. Telemetry, I'm checking. We may need to follow up on telemetry.
Yeah, let's not. That's more like a heads up, not a take action yet. I've got to talk to Eric about it. Eric Brinkman about it this afternoon.
Okay. Cool. I'll take an extra time on reconciling that the requirements from Ram and this meeting. I'll add that to that's an action item on my side. Follow up for next meeting. Cool. We have 9 minutes left. Why don't we go ahead and review our exit criteria? I do have an MR out already to start scoring this, so why don't I just share my screen and show what I have here. So I did move some stuff down, please ignore. I did score this one to done. And Christopher, you want to chime into the development department throughput? I know we've been monitoring the numbers, so can.
Yeah, basically the KPI that Eric and I agreed to is 10 RMRs per engineer. So last high month we had was before Contribute, which was at 9. So I'd tag this at 90%.
Okay. You want me to go ahead and score this at 90% afterwards?
Yeah, you can do that. Mm-hmm.
Why don't we just do this? Let's showcase our product here. Love the web ID. %. We touched on 9 MRs per author. The next one is define KPIs for development organization and dashboard. Should this be here? Because I noticed we have a working group for KPIs already.
So for purposes of this meeting, I think we're at 100% effectively on this. There is a KPI meeting. That's mainly focused on the overall engineering KPIs. I do have a set of KPIs that I'm managing for the development organization. Eventually, we're going to need to get that KPI over to Periscope, but that's a work in progress.
Okay.
Separate from this working group.
Sure. So is it safe to assume that originally our KPIs here were to automate those 3 persistent links, correct? And it's now done?
Yeah, that's the way I'm treating that.
Cool. Okay. Okay. Going to what's the next one? Ensuring all customer-facing bugs have a severity level. So we have an OKR to triage existing customer bugs with S1, S2s first. Once that's done, we'll pick on this. So I don't have any progress on here yet. I'll leave it as such. Gather time to resolve, that's done. And then the next one is monitoring average time to resolve S1, S2 issues to go down to 130 days and 300 days. I think we should still wait for this month of June numbers to come in and reevaluate this. And an effective iteration to the current stage group triage package. I think we have made some progress here already. I'm going to score this at, I think we have the data. 1 second. Oops. What's it? It's at 50%. The data need to include in each stage groups triage report. Okay. And I don't think we made progress on the training programs yet on our side.
No, the only thing I would add on training is that I merged the stub, or Tim merged it, but like there is a stub in our development for onboarding, and potentially we could start to put some of these training material there for managers So Meg, if you want to take a look, I'm happy to pick up like a small issue and go small increments on this training instead of we're going to wait and do a big training and record it and so on.
No, we shouldn't wait for a big bang. Let's just
exactly.
And we're 2%, sounds like.
Sure. Iteration. 1 second. We have, I would say, a venue, right? Roll this out. That sound accurate? Good. Okay. I will go ahead and score this. Going back to our merge requests. Okay, I will assign these out for the stakeholders here to review. After that, let's merge it in, and then that's it for scoring. I'm just gonna stop sharing my screen. We are at 4 minutes ahead of time. Anything else you would like to discuss? Very good. Okay, cool. Thank you. I will follow up. Jason, maybe you're the best person to help me with this and your buy-in as well on the team and stage label merging or whatever. I'll probably come up with an issue and then tag you on it first before we pull the rest of the product.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think just, create that issue and we can start there. I would recommend sharing it in the product chat just because, everybody does things slightly differently at GitLab, which you guys know better than anybody. So it would be, I think that would be the right place to start.
Cool. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. And my apologies. I'm going to enable all viewers, participants now going forward. I'm sorry for missing you out earlier in the meeting.
There's no problem. I did come in late, so that was my bad as well. So no worries.
Cool then. I will upload this on YouTube and see you all next time. Thank you.
Thank you.